Welcome to Hmong Short Stories. If you're not a fan of scary stories, feel free to click away. But if you're like us and enjoy a good scare, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our community of thrill seekers. With that being said, let's begin. In a small city in Wisconsin, where the wind whispers secrets through the city, there was an abandoned house that sat at the end of a cul-de-sac. Its windows were broken and its doors hung ajar. When the wind blows, you can hear the squeaky sound of the rusty hinges. My friends and I had always been fascinated by this house, drawn to it with a mixture of fear and excitement. It was a perfect place for an adventure, or so we thought. My Hmong friends and I learned from some Miga friends from school that there is a thing called a Ouija board, and if you use it, then you'll be able to get in contact with the other side. We became curious because as Hmong kids, we know a little bit about the dark side, but we just never experienced it ourselves. It was a chilly evening in October before the sun set. My friends Ku, Ming, and we decided that it was a perfect night to explore that abandoned house. We had heard stories, rumors of ghosts and spirits that haunt the hallways, but we didn't believe them, or at least we pretend not to. Armed with only a flashlight, we set out. The house became more dark and sinister as the sun disappeared with the dying light. The air felt heavier as we approached, and I couldn't tell if it was the cold or something else. Something other. Pushing the door open, we stepped inside, our footsteps echoing in the empty, dusty house. We made our way to the center of the house, the living room, where the remains of a life once lived still linger in the form of faded wallpaper and a dusty, moth-eaten sofa. It was here, in the heart of a forgotten place, that Ming took out a Ouija board. We all had agreed to bring it as a joke and see if it would really work like our Miga friend had said. But as Ming put it on the floor, the atmosphere shifted. What had started as an adventure suddenly felt like a mistake. The Ouija board was old, its letter faded, and the pointer, a heart-shaped piece of wood, felt unnaturally cold to the touch. I asked Ming where did he get the Ouija board from, and he said that he asked his Miga friends if he can borrow it. I then felt a cold wind burst right between me and Ming. Ming said jokingly, "Oya, con chai lo?" I said, "No, con ta yu tuan chai." Ming then said, "Hey, maybe a Hmong dad will come through." He said it with a giggle. We sat in a circle around the Ouija board, the beam of the flashlight cast along the shadow on the walls. Ku was the first one to speak. His voice barely made a whisper. "Is there anyone here with us?" he asked, his fingers slightly touching the pointer alongside ours. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the pointer began to move. It glided across the board, stopping on yes. Our hearts raced, a mix of fear and exhilaration pulsing through us. "Who are you?" Ming asked, his voice trembling. The pointer moved again, spelling out M-A-R-Y. We looked at each other, our eyes widened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, the air growing cold around us. "Mary, are you the one haunting this house?" I managed to ask. The pointer slowly moved. It moved straight to the word, yes. We all were choked up to where none of us could speak and just stared at each other. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and went out, plunging us into the darkness. Panic surged with me. A scream caught in my throat. Then, the light on the flashlight returned, revealing the pointer had moved to the word, goodbye. We didn't need any further prompting. Scrabbling our feet, we ran from the house, the sound of our own terror echoing in our ears. We didn't stop until we reached the safety of the streetlights. Breathless and shaken, we promised never to speak of this ever again, but the experience stayed with us, the haunting memories that refused to fade. Strange things started to happen the following days. My mom's Hmong Barbie dolls would fall off the shelf, and they have never done that before. At night, I would hear a lady crying outside my window as if she was in need of help. My friend Ming, who was the one who borrowed the Ouija board, became really sick for a whole week and didn't show up for school. We tried to convince ourselves it was just our imagination, the aftermath of scaring ourselves. But deep down, we knew we had awakened something in that house. Something that had followed us home. Mary, or whatever it pretended to be, had crossed over from her world to ours. The events accumulated one night at Ku's house. We had gathered there trying to find some time to spend with each other so we can forget what happened at the abandoned house. But as night came, his room started to get colder. The electricity in his room went out, and we were in darkness. We gathered together, fear gripped our hearts. Then, in the blackness, we heard it, a soft, mocking laughter that seems to come from nowhere. It was followed by a voice, whispery and cold. It said, "You called me, so now I'm here." We screamed, started pushing each other in a frantic attempt to escape, but the door wouldn't budge. The windows were sealed shut. We were trapped. The laughter grew louder, surrounding us, suffocating us. It felt like an eternity before the electricity came back. The room was empty, a save for us. The fear, the event, had left a mark on us. We knew we couldn't ignore what had happened. We had to find a way to end this. We got out our phones and searched up the address of the abandoned house and why it was abandoned. Our research led us back to the house, to Mary. We learned that she was a young girl who was murdered in the 1990s, a girl who had died in her house, a mystery circumstance. Believing her spirit was trapped, we decided to try and communicate with her again, to help her find a peace. If we don't do this, she will continue to linger around us, and worst of all, if we tell our parents, we will for sure get in trouble. Because we have always been told to never do anything that deals with Janeng Edu Tomula. Armed with a determination and a deep sense of regret, we returned to the abandoned house. We set up the Ouija board once more, this time with a different intent. "Mary," we called into the darkness, "we're here to apologize to you." The pointer then moved slowly, pointing to the word "no." The air around us grew cold once more, and a feeling of sadness filled the room. It was very overwhelming. We asked her, what can we do for her to forgive us for our foolish actions? Mary then spelled out the word DESTROY. We asked, "Destroy what?" Then the Ouija board flew about 5 feet away from us. We figured it was the board that she wanted us to destroy. We did as she asked. We brought the Ouija board to the back of the house and threw it into a dirt pit and set it on fire. We waited until the board was ashes, then we covered it up with sticks and dead leaves. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences ceased. The whispers, the shadows, the feelings of being watched, all disappeared. But the experience changed us, taught us to respect the unknown and to never again invite a force we don't understand. This abandoned house still hasn't been demolished even until this day. If you are ever curious to know where this house is located, all I can say is the location is in a small city that starts with the letter N. It was a typical Friday night for me and my friends, bored, reckless, and looking for something to do to pass the time. That's when Tu came up with the idea that would change everything. "Let's go to the cemetery and play hide and seek," he said. His eyes lightened up with a mix of excitement. "Whoever gets found first has to buy all of us McDonald's," he said. The idea was met with a mixture of laughter and nervous glances. The cemetery, with its spooky tombstone and an old mausoleum, sat on an old skirt of the city, a place of rest of souls long past. It was the kind of place you'll rush past during the day and avoid entirely at night. But the thrill of the unknown, the adrenaline rush of doing something a little bit forbidden, was too tempting to resist. So we agreed. There was 6 of us. 2, Chris, Tony, Pao, Dylan, and me, armed with nothing but our phone's flashlight. We drove my Honda Civic to the cemetery, the excitement building with each rev. The night was eerily quiet, the only sound being our footsteps and a distant howl of the wind. As we approached the cemetery gates, the reality of what we're going to do sinks in. The once inviting challenge now seemed like a daunting task. The gates, twisted and rusty, creaks as we pushed them open. The sound sliced through the silence of the night. We decided on the rules: no hiding in the mausoleum, stay within the boundaries of the cemetery, and no using your phones except for emergencies. I was chosen as the seeker first. The others scattered into the night. Their laughters and tauntings fade into the distance. I counted to 100, my heart pounding not just from the anticipation of the game, but also from the sheer eeriness of being alone amongst the graves. The game began innocently enough. I found Tony hiding behind a large angel statue, Pao crouched behind a family crypt, and Chris laughing quietly under a willow tree. But as the game progressed, a fog began to roll in, thick and white. It felt like the atmosphere of the cemetery was changing, becoming something more creepy, as if it disapproved of our presence. It was while searching for Tu and Dylan that I stumbled upon a lost kid. He was sitting quietly behind a tombstone, his knees pulled up to his chest, head buried into his arms. His clothes look ragged, and it seems like he hasn't washed his face for a couple days now. When I shined my light at him, he looked up. He couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. "Hey kid, are you okay?" I asked, my voice soft, trying not to scare him. He nodded, but there was a hesitance in his movement that made my stomach churn with worry. "I can't find my way out," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rustle of the leaves. I quickly called out my friends, my voice echoing through the gravesites. One by one, they emerged from their hiding spots, their expressions turning from the confusion to concern as they saw the boy. "We need to take him to the police station," Tu said. "They can help find his parents." I can tell Tu was shaken up by the shakiness of his voice. We all agreed, gathering around the boy, trying to offer smiles and reassurance. As we walked towards the cemetery gates, the boy between all of us, the fog seems to thicken, the atmosphere growing heavier with each step. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the shadow between the graves were moving, shifting shapes in the corner of my vision. But it was when we reached the gates that the night took its most terrifying turn. As we passed through the warrant iron, I turned to make sure the boy was keeping up, only to find that the boy was gone, vanished without a trace. We searched the area just inside the gate, thinking maybe he had fallen behind or was hiding. But there was no sign of him, no footprints in the dewy grass, nothing. Panic set in. We retraced our steps, calling out for him, our voices desperate. The cemetery felt alive now, hostile, as if it was actively hiding the boy from us. We searched until the first light of dawn began to break through the fog, but it was like as if the earth had swallowed him whole. Exhausted, scared, and confused, we made our way to the police station, reporting what had happened. I can tell the officers didn't believe us. Their eyes darted between us as if we were making a joke. They promised to search the cemetery to look into the missing child's report, but their reassurance felt empty, hollow. In the days that followed, the city was abuzz with the story of the lost boy in the cemetery. Searches were conducted, flyers were posted, but no child matching his description was ever reported missing. No one had seen him before at night, and no one saw him ever after that. It was as if he never existed. But we knew what we had seen that night. the memories of the night haunting us. The image of the lost boy echoed in our minds. Guilt weighed heavily on us. The thought that we had made him up, that we were somehow responsible for his disappearance. My name is Pana, and I never believed in ghosts or anything supernatural. That was until I spent the night at my friend Ga's house. We stayed up late watching Hmong horror movies. Eventually, we fell asleep. The digital clock on Ga's nightstand read 1:47 a.m. when my eyes started to close. I woke up suddenly. The house was silent around me. The clock is now at 2:03 a.m. Nature was calling urgently. I got up quietly, not wanting to wake up Ga, and tiptoed my way out of the room. The hallway was dark. The only light was the moon shining through the windows. That's when I heard it. A mumbling, almost like someone was in distress. Curiosity took over my initial fear, and I followed the sound. It seemed like it was coming from the kitchen. As I got closer, the mumbling stopped, and I heard the faucet turned on, followed by the sound of dishes clinking together. My heart raced. "Lingtuna," I whispered, hoping someone would answer, but there was only silence. I reached the kitchen doorway and hesitated. Taking a deep breath, I peeked around the corner, but the kitchen was empty. The faucet was off. The dishes were still. The room felt colder somehow. The air started to get thick. Confused and a bit frightened, I turned to head back to the bathroom. That's when I saw her. An old woman wearing Hmong clothes, with the red and green hla dangling in front of her waist, standing right in front of me. So close I can see the details on her wrinkly face. Her eyes widened and staring at me. Her tongue was sticking out, almost touching her chin, and the saliva was dripping off the tip of it. When she was walking towards me, you can hear her bones slowly cracking as she moves. She was also making a scary moaning voice, as in she was in pain. Without noticing, my whole body went limp and I hit the floor, and everything went black. I woke up on the cold kitchen floor the next morning. As I was slowly opening my eyes, I can see that Ga was kneeling beside me with a concerned face. "You fainted, Kapowalija," she said while helping me get up. I nodded, still dazed. My heart raced as I remembered the old lady. Gu po itu neng nya halu kitchen. I managed to get that part out. Ga's face turned pale. She whispered, Che kapo kupapa. Huh? Kapo. I just became more scared. Turns out, Ga's grandma has passed away before I even met her. Ga nodded, taking a deep breath before she continued. Yeah, my pa died about 2 months ago, but strange things have been happening ever since. We would hear noises and see things move. My parents think that this house is haunted by her. We're planning to move out soon. I just sat there trying to process Ga's words. The logical part of my brain wanted to find a reasonable explanation, but deep down, I knew what I saw was real. The fear I felt was real. The rest of the day passed by slowly. Ga and I talked a lot, trying to make sense of what happened. But some things just don't have an explanation. When my parents came and picked me up, I couldn't leave fast enough. I glanced back at the house as we drove away, half expecting to see Ga's ball glaring at me from the window. But there was only silence and the heavy weight of unanswered questions. Months later, Ga and her parents left the house. The house was up for sale. Ever since then, I just didn't keep in contact with Ga anymore.